And you are in the Capitol, sure that the legislators don't protect us. We're not always winning, but we're going to try. Teri Grier.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here, and like Bill, I was all ready to come out and rally you and give you a lot of numbers and statistics. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I was raised in a rural area. I grew up in a mining town, mining and lumber. I live in an area very similar to where I grew up, and I'll tell you that when I look in the faces of the people there, I see the faces of the people that I grew up with. The people who don't have jobs because of the cuts in our lumber industry, the people who are trying so hard to keep their families together because other family members are having to go to other places in the state or even out of state in order to get jobs. And I see that they're very sad. After the primary, I spent almost every single day knocking on doors, talking to people on the phone, or driving around my district. And my district goes from Coos Bay all the way up from Yachats. It comes this direction inland, right around Triangle Lake. And if you've ever driven that way, you know that there are tons of little tiny communities of people just like you and I. And the constant message is that they were frustrated. They were frustrated because they felt like nobody was listening to them. And I feel like right now I've got a lot of people listening to me, but you're the choir. You're the people that I know believe in what we're doing. And what we really need is for you to go find 1, 2, 3, 4 friends and to bring them to the next Republican meeting. Because when I first walked into the Republican Central Committee meeting in Coos Bay, there were 6 people sitting around a table because people were so decimated by what had happened during the last 8 years. Now we're up to over 50. We're a third of the way in getting all of our PCP positions filled. How many of you people are PCPs? I want to see any of you who aren't PCPs, I want you to talk to someone next to you and say, what in the world is a PCP and how do I become one? Because that is the ground army for change. This is the place where we start right now. I have to tell you that what I saw in there, although my heart is sick and my stomach is even sicker, you should be very proud of your legislators because they stood and towed the line. It wasn't just emotional rhetoric, which is all real, but they looked for loopholes in that legislation in order to turn it around. And I want you to know that the other side is really worried because we have on record right now that under this legislation that just passed out of the House, every single small business now has to provide abortion care under their health insurance. And it's in exact opposition to what has happened on the national level with Hobby Lobby. And so we have it on record here that what they're doing is unconstitutional, violates the rights of our small businesses. We came here today to talk about incremental taxes. This is the reason why I got into this. When I was sitting and watching what was happening last March in the legislative session, and by the way, I've been working in public policy for 25 years. I spent 7 years working at a state capitol working on these issues. And I saw emergency clause after emergency clause after emergency clause come through. And by the way, I know what emergency clause is, and I know what it isn't. And I sat here yesterday watching almost every single bill with an emergency clause being passed out on third read, and it wasn't an emergency. The short session is supposed to be used to take care of items that have come up in a short period of time. It's not supposed to be used for major pieces of legislation. Major pieces that do things like raise the minimum wage in the state of Oregon. That's something that should be talked about a long time, not pushed through in 30 days, and that's what we saw. When I started looking at the tax base in Oregon and how it ranked with the rest of the country, there's an organization called I just drew a blank, sorry. Anyway, the statistics show that Oregon is part of the poor states. We're at the very bottom, number 44. There are a few states that have a worse situation than we have. And that report that came out, It actually came out before the special session last year. Before we had mandatory vacation and sick leave imposed on our small businesses, before we had the increase in the minimum wage imposed on our small businesses, that report was a snapshot in time for then. And now, we not only have those two new pieces, but we have Measure 97, and I think the people spoke pretty loud that they did not like Measure 97, didn't they? Yeah. They did. But guess what? The Democrats here are shoving it down your throat anyway. I kind of feel like it was when I was a little kid and my mom used to make me eat liver and say, just take the spoon and fill it full of ketchup and hold your nose. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of holding my nose. Yeah. What I've been seeing over the last 2 weeks as I've sat there is incremental changes on many different bills, a raise in tax here, a raise in tax there. Now imagine if we were number 44 in a snapshot a year and a half ago, what are we going to be when that report comes out next? How many of you people are small business owners? Small business owner, I'm a small business owner, and I want you to know, I've worked on economic development issues for almost 20 years. And I know they look for a community that's tax-friendly. They look for a community that has good schools. They look for communities in which they can find trained individuals to work in those businesses. Our schools are at the bottom of the list. We are far from tax-friendly. And it makes us an environment where companies don't want to come. And these people aren't listening. So the only way they're going to start listening is if you get your neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor and the next neighbor and the next neighbor and get involved. We saw that we can make a change. We have Dennis Richardson in the Secretary of State's office. That is the change. That is the momentum that we need to work on. One by one, we can do this. I also know that we need to be strategic. There's just a certain amount of money out there and available, and we need to come together and make sure that we put it towards those districts that can win. By the way, did I tell you how close I got? Less than 1,100 votes difference between me and one of the most positive members of Democrat leadership in that building. They ignored me because they thought I was a no one. 2 weeks out, they did a survey, and guess what? We were at a dead heat. What did they do? They dumped $200,000 of union money into the other team, and they put people like Val Hoyle into cars, sent them down to Coos Bay, and they started knocking on doors. So on one side of the street, I'd be knocking, and I'd look across the other side, and the candidate's husband would be there, and I'd wave. And we need to help those districts that are just a margin away pull the difference. All we need is 5 or 6 seats, and it's a very different conversation. What happened here last hour, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But we need your help. We need boots on the ground. So how many of you are going to make sure you sign up to be PCPs? If you're not a PCP, please talk to someone. Talk to Bill. Bill's right there. He'll get you connected with the people in your county. They will help get you involved. And we will work towards your talents. If you don't want to make phone calls, fine. We'll have you stuff envelopes. There is something that every single person can do to make a difference. Little by little, we will make change. And we'll be having a different discussion this time in 2019. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.